Welcome, fellow members of the Bloomington Rotary Club. And guests, visiting Rotarians, and Community Access TV services, and our viewers in the community. I'm Aaron Davis, the club's president-elect, filling in for our club president, Lawrence Snyder. Welcome to our weekly luncheon celebration. Thanks to today's greeter, Peggy Frisbee, and the roundabout reporter, John Diltz, and everyone who helped to put today's program together. And now, I'll introduce Judy Schroeder for the pledge and reflection.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Yes, it's September 11th, a day when we think hard about the republic for which this flag stands. I'm reading right now Madeleine Albright's Fascism, a Warning, and that makes me particularly ponder the words one nation, indivisible. Fascism arises, Albright says, when we divide ourselves into us and them, when we magnify our differences and lose sight of our similarities. We set aside critical thinking and allow loyalty to distance us from truth when we become part of a tribe that demonizes others. The title of a new book speaks volumes, The Lies That Bind. This country is not immune from fascist appeal. I'm old enough to remember the McCarthy era. Joe McCarthy played fast and loose with the truth. No charge was too outrageous to hurl at an enemy, because if communism was the ultimate evil, then we had to oppose it at all costs. Yes, fascism can happen here. An immigrant to this country observed, you Americans kick your country around like a football. It's not a football, it's a Fabergé egg. It can break. What questions should we be asking ourselves when we elect our leaders? The answers don't tell us to what political party they belong, but they do tell us about their and our commitment to democracy and freedom. Do they cater to our prejudices, suggesting that people outside our ethnicity, our creed, our party are unworthy of dignity and respect? Do they nurture our anger, rub raw our grievances, make us think others must lose if we are to win? Do they encourage contempt for our governing institutions? Do they seek to destroy our faith in such essential bulwarks of democracy as an independent press and an independent judicial system? Or do they invite us to join with them in the hard work of building and maintaining a democratic society, one nation, indivisible? Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And now, Michael Shermis will introduce our guests.
Thanks, Aaron. Good afternoon, Rotarians. Let me introduce some of our guests. And guests, as I give you your name, would you please rise so we can recognize you? Joe Darling is a guest of Liz Irwin's from People's State Bank and a potential Rotary member. Teed Howard is a Brown County Rotarian and works at Country Gentleman, I think. Debbie Hicks is a guest of Jean Emery, and she is a travel consultant. And Carolyn Frey and Terry Frey are visiting from Sunrise, and Terry's an unknown past district governor. And Gary Taylor is visiting from Bloomington North. Thanks. Almost everybody's connected to Rotary in some way, so I don't need to give the standard thing, but in case you want to know more, just talk to anybody next to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. And now for our Rotary family, we'll have the Lauren Snyder report. Lauren, Morgan, and Coleman, who is now over a week old. Actually, they're all over a week old. They're all doing well and starting to get some nice rest. Coleman is eating and sleeping very well. So, by the way, thanks for those who have chipped in for a baby gift. Natalie is still accepting contributions. We're purchasing a Rotary bib and 2 onesies, one for now and one for after he grows a bit. So, see her after the meeting. And thank you, Natalie, for all the help that you bring. I want to congratulate Matt and Molly Stitzinger on their July wedding. And then birthdays this week, Elan Barker on the 9th, September 12th. Elaine Gwynn on the 16th. And membership anniversaries this week, Byron Bangert, 19 years in Rotary. So I have some pre-program announcements. Thank you to the club members who helped out at the Boys and Girls Club's Smart Girls, Strong Women event on September 6th. Please stand and let us recognize you, everyone who attended. People of action. On September 15th, our club's Amethyst House Service Project with our district grant, Ann Connors asks people who have signed up to volunteer to be at Amethyst House on Saturday at 9 a.m. That's at 515 South Madison Street. And the Comedy Addicts 10th anniversary benefit for Teachers Warehouse apparently is sold out. But if you have a way to get in, it's supposed to be a really great event and obviously a wonderful cause. Lots of Rotarians will be there. See Sarah Laughlin for details if you want. Next, District Governor Sue Wright is speaking here on October 2nd. Our club is very active in our Rotary district, so this will be an important event. For the Rotary Toast, I'd like to have Jim Bright give you an update.
Thank you, Aaron. It's my pleasure to invite all of you to join us for the Friday, November 2nd Bloomington Rotary Toast in the Indiana University's Alumni Hall again this year. This is the 4th annual, and this year we will be saluting Steve and Connie Ferguson, who are outstanding pillars of the community. As in previous years, we will sell out. So you don't want to wait. At your table, you've got information on how to secure seats, so be sure to do that. Half of the proceeds this year will go to the Ferguson's chosen charity, which will be the Ivy Tech Scholarship Fund, and the other half will be divided equally among the 3 local Bloomington Rotary clubs, our club, North, and Sunrise, for our charitable works. For the first 3 years of the Bloomington Rotary Toast, this event has generated over $115,000 that have gone to area charities. So again, I encourage you, for those of you who've been, you know what a wonderful event it is. It's Rotary's night to shine in the community. Please join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, past District Governor Jim Bright. Our Global Grant Scholar, Aubrey Cedar, is in London. And we'll have updates. We'll be able to give you updates that you'll be able to find through her website, but she hasn't started posting. Her mission is to build peace and understanding through the arts. Another youth aspect is our Rotary District is now accepting applications for the Rotary Youth Exchange for 2019 through 2020. Deadline's October 28th. It's for 16 to 18-year-olds. And now, Jean Emery is going to help us with Happy Dollars.
Next up here, Sarah. I'm really happy because my daughter got a new job here at University. She's going to be the Director of Strategic and Program Initiatives for the Vice Provost for Student Affairs. And her office will be just right down the hall here. So I told her there's no reason she can't join Rotary now.
I'm happy because I'm almost sold out of our centennial pictures. So if you want any of these, I've got 5 or 6 left for $10 a piece, and they're of the gala event first event. Priceless.
Who was it? Tim, go ahead.
We all, thanks to Bob Saltzman. We need the money. Bob Saltzman, who's not very often here, but he's a good friend and a good Rotarian. I have a new gig. I'm now going to be a freelance writer for the New York Times. I would love to write about sports and politics, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to write about religion. So you all be good, or I'll write about you.
Change. No. High five for.
Well, because I want to remind everyone that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is the sale at the Friends of the Library book sale at the downtown public library. So please come, buy books, and enjoy.
And yes, Debbie wanted to do a happy dollar.
Well, I actually have $3 happy dollars.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm a member of the Bedford Rotary Club, and I'm here to promote a fundraiser, if you will. So this fundraiser happens to be a Southern Caribbean cruise in February. My first happy dollar is because for every cabin sold, there'll be a donation to the Rotary Foundation. Secondly, there will be a service project for hurricane relief at the Port of St. Martin when we stop there. And thirdly, obviously, is to be able to sail with fellow Rotarians, have fun and camaraderie, sail with old friends, meet new friends. So I'll stick around for a few minutes after the meeting. If anyone wants to fly up, has other questions, I'd love to talk to you about this fundraiser for the foundation. Thank you.
Jim, sorry.
Well, several of us are readers of the Herald Times. This past weekend, there was a picture of a mural at Fairview Elementary. If you read the complete story, you realize that the benefactors for that mural are both Glenda and Patrick Murray. I also know from my time in the schools that they've been silent partners with Fairview for longer than any of us can remember or know. So you're a treasure, you and your husband. Thank you. I'm happy because I'm going to be Virginia Saturday. I'm looking forward to a great season.
I'm feeling a happy dollar, and I've known Joe Darling for a long time. When he walked into there, I'm like, oh my gosh. So anyway, even though he works at People's, don't hold that against him. But no, let's all welcome Joe. I think he'll be a great addition to our Rotary Club. So.
And one more, just for my son, Jonathan, my middle son, is leaving Wednesday to go to Berlin to run in the Berlin Marathon. And a great act of courage that I don't have, and stamina that I don't have. A lot of stuff I don't have. So I'm happy, though, for him.
That's it.
Okay, thank you all. And now I'd like to welcome up here Nancy Kruger to introduce our very special guest speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to introduce our speaker today, Selma Shabanovich. Did I get that right? Okay. Selma is involved in the esoteric world of artificial intelligence, robots, and human interaction. She received her PhD in Science and Technology Studies from Rensselaer Polytech Institute in 2007, with a dissertation on the cross-cultural study of robotic designs in Japan and the United States. She is currently an associate professor of informatics and cognitive sciences at IU, where she founded and directs the Our House Human-Robot Interactive Lab. I hope we'll learn a little bit more about what that is. Her research focuses on design, use, and consequences of socially interactive assistive robots in different cultural contexts, different countries, and in different situations like healthcare institutions or a user's home. She draws on approaches from the social sciences to design and implement intelligent interactive technologies that provide benefits to users and their communities. Her collaborative approach for the design of robots involves users such as older adults, clinicians, and children. Along with her teaching position at IU, Selma has been a visiting professor at Bielefeld University Cluster of Excellence in Cognitive Interaction Technology, that's a mouthful, in Germany, a lecturer in Stanford University's program in Science, Technology, and Society, and a visiting scholar at the Intelligent Systems Institute in Japan and the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. She was awarded IU's Outstanding Junior Faculty Award in 2013 and the Trustees Teaching Award in 2016 and 2018. Please join me in welcoming Selma Shabanovich.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction and for inviting me here. I'm very excited to be speaking to you. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes, or not, well, no, hopefully not minutes, seconds, to connect the technology. Okay. Oh, is it off? Yeah. No problem. Well, while we're waiting for that to get started, Nancy mentioned I'm in an esoteric field, and as she mentioned, I study something called social robots, and often something called socially assistive robots, so they're robots that help people through the social interaction, not necessarily the physical interaction like taking your trash out or mowing your lawn. So how many of you have seen a social robot before? A few. Well, in case you haven't, I actually brought one. I brought our easiest to use robot. And so I'll just show it to you. So it's called Paro. It was actually designed in the Japanese institute that I was visiting at, in the lab that I worked in. And it's like a robot seal, as you can see. And so some of the things it can do, it can, when you pet it, it responds to touch, it responds to sound, it can respond to light. So you can actually, feel free, do you want to play with it after, or just come by after the talk and maybe pet it if you want. So just now you know. This is what one kind of socially assisted robot looks like. I'm going to put it to sleep because it tends to mew and be very distracting. And so my interest in these kind of technologies, I come from a social science background. And I'm really interested, of course people are interested in the technology, but what I'm also really interested in is how can this kind of technology benefit people? How can we design things so that they fit our lives? And particularly in times when there are a lot of suggestions that we can use these technologies in some of the most intimate and personal spaces that we inhabit. So here are just some examples of roboticists' ideas of how robots might fit in the home. One from Japan, one from Bill Gates. And today I'm going to focus mainly on one particular subset of these kinds of robots, which is robots being designed for elder care. This is, as you can imagine, a large kind of focus in robotics. It's also a large focus generally in healthcare, in policy. And so roboticists are trying to figure out, we have all of these technologies, they can sometimes recognize people, they can collect sensor data, they can move around, they can maybe pick things up. But how do we even think about how these kinds of things might be able to assist older adults, their caregivers, clinicians, in some way, both help people stay in their homes, but also make things like caregiver burden lower. Today we do other things in education, more in kind of cognitive science, social psychology, but I'm going to focus on the elder care bit because we only have 20 minutes. So I'm going to talk about two different kinds of things that we've been involved in. One is thinking about this idea of how can you have robots in the home? And another one is thinking a little bit more broadly and thinking about how robots might fit into our existing organizations and communities. So robots in the home first, and this is probably something that we're all familiar with. One of the things, there are a lot of times that robotics researchers are trying to make robots for the home, and here you just have some pictures on a desk that people were sorting that have some of these kinds of robots. Some of them look like Paro, like a pet. Some of them may be like the Roomba vacuum cleaner. Others are more humanoid. You know, they may have arms, they may move around. There's lots of different kinds of robots. And one of the things we were interested early on is we kind of know as robotics researchers how we define these robots, but how do potential users actually even think of them? So if you think of Paro, like what are some of the things that come to mind? What kind of robot is this to you? Cuddly. What else? Comforting. Maybe it's a little weird, because why would you have a seal? But maybe it's useful, maybe it's friendly. So when we ask people who aren't necessarily just designing the robots how they see them, they come up with these kinds of ideas. Oh, this is something that's scary to me. This is something that I could use. This is something that could fit in my house. Or, you know, this kind of style I definitely don't want to have. Whereas for researchers, we call them, oh, humanoids, this is a zoomorphic, socially assistive robot. We have very different ways of categorizing them and thinking about design. So because we found these very big differences in just even ways that users and robot designers think about robots, we started doing more work in terms of understanding how some of the technologies that people are developing today might be taken up or not taken up by the people that they're being designed for. So a few years ago, we did a study with older adults where we went to their homes and we just showed them pictures and videos of a lot of different kinds of robots being designed for older adults. And we asked them to tell us what they thought about them. Does this seem useful or not? Can they critique the robots? And they said a lot of different things, but one of the things that really struck us is that for most people, they looked at the robots and said, well, this is cool, but it's definitely not for me. And it wasn't something that they wanted to use. And it wasn't just not for me because maybe the people that we talked to were healthy, or the kind of application that the roboticists had envisioned wasn't something they were interested in. They were particularly turned off from the robots because one of the things that they saw is that robotics researchers were really looking at aging largely as a disability, as the time when you start lacking things. And all of the robots were kind of designed with this in mind. How can we kind of fit into a niche where people get from the robot something that they lack. And the older adults that we talked to said, well, this is, maybe this is part of our experience, but it's not all of it. And actually, some of the things they wanted were things that would actually support the things that they already do, the things that they enjoy, their friends, connections with family, and those kinds of things. And this kind of opened our eyes to this notion that we need to think about robots differently, perhaps. And our next step became thinking about, well, how can we bring these voices into design earlier? Not just once we've made something and we want to test it out and show people and figure out whether they like it or not, but actually early on, so we can kind of cater or create the design around things that the users really care about and need. So we went to a particular type of design that's known in the kind of human-computer interaction community called participatory design, which seeks to really engage with users from early on, not just to figure out, does the robot look like a seal or a dog, but actually to figure out what are the purposes of the design, what kinds of aims should it be fulfilling. And so we talked to older adults and clinicians. We were, in this case, particularly interested in people who had depression. And so we talked to them and we set up a series of workshops with them where we could both understand their experiences, but also start kind of thinking through with them what kind of robots might fit into their daily lives. So this is just a quick kind of depiction of all the different steps we took. We did interviews with older adults, with therapists and clinicians. We did different kinds of workshops. And then finally, we also talked to staff about some of the things that we had designed. And I'm going to give you just a quick little overview of things we learned. So one of the things that struck us immediately, because we did interviews with older adults, our first interviews in their homes, we wanted to meet them in a place where they were comfortable. We also wanted to understand a little bit more about the kind of environment that they live in, where these technologies would be fitting. And we found two things. One, the usual home of an older adult doesn't really look like these very modernist and clean, clear labs that everyone has, where they design robots and put robots out in advertisements, obviously. And also that older adults, despite this kind of notion that people often have that they're very technology averse, everybody already used technology. But they didn't necessarily just use technology for technology's sake. They used it in ways that really kind of fit their environment. Another type of thing we learned is just some of their daily concerns from both older adults and staff. So we were dealing with older adults with depression, so loneliness and isolation obviously were big issues, but also we learned that social interaction, like with pets or with family members, was something that really helped them kind of get out of their most difficult moments. And we also talked to them about things like what are challenges? So lack of funding, which definitely comes into also the ability or the lack of ability to use robots. We showed older adults, so we learned something about older adults, but in order to design together, we needed them to learn about robots as well. So we showed them a lot of different kinds of robots, both on videos and in person. And then we started coming up with different kinds of design ideas. So these are just some examples. We had one of the graduate students from human-computer interaction who was wonderful at drawing would basically just draw immediately what people were saying. And then we used these drawings to kind of discuss and further critique people's ideas. We kind of isolated particular characteristics we wanted from robots, companionship, different kind of appearances, the idea that it needed to be portable. They wanted to have it always with them. And we also thought about, well, how would it fit in their home? Where would it be? What kinds of places could it enter or not? What other kinds of people would it have to interact with? Like this one was particularly, the person was interested in having it interact with her grandchildren. And finally, we got together with the older adults and looked at some actual components of robots, different kinds of sensors that we could use in them, and then discussed whether they were appropriate or not, what kinds of things they could measure about the older adults' environment that might be interesting information for them or for clinicians. And also some different kinds of designs. So the older adults wanted maybe to have robots help them manage interactions with others, whether they were too few or too many, and also really fit in their home. And finally, we talked with clinicians about designs that we came up with, and one of the things that came out is sometimes the older adults would say, well, I want the robot to remind me of what I'm not supposed to eat, and just tell me, just don't eat that cookie. But the clinician said, well, okay, it's a good idea, but really we want people to reflect on their own, on what they're doing, on their own behavior, decide for themselves. So, maybe the robot can ask things like, are you sure you want to eat it? Is this a good time to eat it, right? So we kind of had feedback from all the different stakeholders who might be involved. So some of the things we came out with is that older adults and therapists were willing to talk to us about this, but also that older adults initially thought of themselves as people who would buy the robots or not really as designers. So it really took a while to kind of get people to open up and think about themselves as having some ability to kind of make decisions about these things. And another thing that was interesting for us is that there seemed to be some direct benefits of participating in this. In a lot of cases, the older adults that we worked with didn't have a lot of social interaction on a daily basis. And so actually coming to these kinds of events was a kind of group activity for them that they valued. But an idea that we came out from this is actually how we might use, so we didn't design a new kind of robot, but we actually thought about how we might use an existing robot to do some of the things that the older adults suggested. So you just saw Paro, and everybody seemed to really, out of all the robots we showed them and all the ideas that we gave them, Paro was kind of a big hit, and everybody liked it, and they wanted us to bring it to all of the workshops. So we thought, well, let's just try something with Paro. And then we did an in-home study where we put Paro in the homes of older adults with depression, but we actually added some sensors that the older adults and clinicians had said that they wanted. Sensors that could track activities of the older adult, how much they interact with the robot, but also things that were happening in the environment. Is it loud? Is it not? Is it dark or is it bright, et cetera, et cetera. And we did this with 12 older adults, and we tried to see if we can learn something about the older adults' depression status from the sensor data. And this was kind of a pilot study, but we had some encouraging results where we could actually kind of track the older adults' changes in their depression also through the sensors. We were collecting some self-report data at the same time. So one of the things that we want to continue doing is working in this kind of connection between having the robot as something that you can interact with at home, but also something that can give clinicians, caregivers, and the older adults themselves some information about what's going on that they can then potentially take and consider as the clinicians think about further therapies, or as the older adults think about their own behavior and how they're feeling. So that was kind of theme number one. I'm going to quickly jump into theme number two, which is, of course, we do things in our homes, but one of the other places that people spend a lot of time is their communities. For older adults, one of these communities is definitely the nursing home. So this is just a little video of Paro being used in a nursing home in Japan. And this is a kind of typical way that people use Paro in the nursing home. They often have group activities together where people can kind of interact with Paro, but also interact with each other. And some of the things that have been found in studying people who participate in these kind of interactions is that it can help improve mood, decrease stress, and actually even get people to socialize more with each other. Where the robot kind of gives them something to talk about, basically. So a lot of research on this has been done in Japan. So one of the things that we wanted to do is to also try it out in the US. So over the last, 4 or 5 years, we've done lots of different kinds of studies with Paro and other robots in a nursing home environment, among others. And some of the things we focused on, since people, in a sense, we know Paro has some of these positive effects, but we were kind of interested in how do these positive effects come about? Is it just that the robot is so awesome that you just hand it to people and suddenly everybody is happier? So we kind of looked into that, and we found that no, that's not exactly how it happens. Although the focus of research has often been on the robot itself, one of the things that we saw by putting the robot into, this group kind of context, we also left it out in an open space in one of the local nursing homes so people could interact with it however they want, whenever they want. One of the things that was really important was actually people engagement with the robot and with people. So one, to introduce the robot appropriately, to get people to understand, like, you can interact with it this way, or, you could think of it as an animal. Also, people tended to interact with the robot more when there were others around. It was kind of, again, a kind of social glue. And another thing that happened, one of the things that people are particularly interested in, which we don't have a lot of examples of, is how do we get these kinds of technologies adopted into organizations? Like, who's going to decide to have one of these things? And one of the things that we saw is that there was a kind of more long-term effect of, having the robot there, seeing how it's useful or not useful, and then making the decision. Because in the beginning, when we put the robot in the nursing home, many people were very skeptical. After it had been there for a few months and they had seen people interacting with it and actually found their own ways of using it most appropriately with their population, people had not only different ideas about Paro, but actually about the possibility of using other robots. And they gave us lots of interesting ideas about what we could do. So it brings up this kind of notion of organizational dynamics as something that's important to consider in the design of these kinds of robots. We've been working since then with other kinds of institutions. I have a PhD student who is very interested in thinking about community robotics, so thinking about how can robots fit, not just affect individuals, but really fit into and be a part of and benefit communities. So one study, I'm going to kind of gloss over this, that she did was in, again, a nursing home, co-designing with people a specific kind of robot that they could use. And here, what was particularly interesting was there was a very visual nature of the community. There were a lot of people, they would see each other, but there was a lot of turnaround, and people would, for example, forget who the other was. They wanted to talk to them, they couldn't remember their name. So like one of the things was, could the robot actually be something like a social enabler for people to get together with each other. Now we're also doing some work with robots to encourage intergenerational interaction between kids and older adults. So I think, yeah, this video will play. I'm just gonna turn off. So we've been putting a lot of different kinds of robots in a local intergenerational daycare. And just seeing what happens when we put the robots there. So this is now, it's a little humanoid. We've taken Paro, we've taken some other robots to see if robots, since we've seen this kind of social effect of people kind of gathering around robots and interacting with each other, can we use this for children and older adults to kind of start talking and start interacting together? Yeah, and the kids are really cute. So just to quickly wrap up before questions, some of the things that we want to kind of focus on in terms of thinking about these kinds of social robots is a lot of research so far has been very much on one-on-one interactions. So, how can we tell that this robot is having a positive interaction with this one person? Is this person happier? Are they kind of benefited? We think that it's important from some of our research to see how does it fit into a group, or how does it fit into a larger organization or community in order to really understand what the benefits might be and how people might adopt it or not. Another focus we've had is kind of going away from this notion of the autonomous robot. I know that's what we see in movies, and that's how we think of robots. They're supposed to be doing things by themselves. But I think all roboticists know that it takes lots of grad students and faculty and technicians and who knows what else to get a robot to do anything. And even though things like Paro, obviously I can turn it on and it works, but still having it fit or fulfill some kind of social goal takes a lot of labor from various people much beyond the kind of designer community or the robotics engineering community. And then finally, you know, kind of thinking also because of that, how robots might fit into the workflow or the culture or the social understanding and social dynamics of these different kinds of spaces, whether it's somebody's home or a nursing home or an intergenerational daycare or, you know, somewhere on the street in Bloomington is extremely important. And so we're going to be doing more work on that. So I want to thank all the people that have worked with us, all our participants, institutional partners, all my awesome students and collaborators, and the NSF and IU and everybody else for giving us money because we can't do it otherwise. And I want to just ask for your questions. So thank you. Yeah.
How does this compare to things like therapy dogs, which are live? I know that's not your field, but there must be.
Yeah, so people have actually compared these things to dogs. Dogs, I think, are definitely more interactive. And that can be positive, it can also be negative. Sometimes people are afraid of dogs, or we've had, one of my students did look at kind of followed people around who did the pet therapy at the institution and then was kind of doing the same thing with Paro. And, you know, issues with pet therapy are you have to wait for the person with the dog to come. Some people are afraid. Sometimes maybe the dogs can be more erratic. So I would say the real life dog, this has some of the similar effects, and it has this kind of added notion of it's predictable for the handler. So, you know, if you leave it with the nursing staff when they need it for somebody who might be maybe getting agitated because they have to be moved from their bed or something, they can just grab it out of the closet and hand it to the person. But, you know, you couldn't do that with a dog. So I think it has a slightly different kind of use. Mm-hmm.
Have you integrated any AI into your robot?
Yeah, so I didn't build this robot, disclaimer. This one is made in Japan. It does have some learning in it, which is basically it will learn different kinds of behaviors. So it's very simple reinforcement learning. The idea is it likes to be petted. So if it's doing something that you like, a sound or something like that, and you pet it, it'll take that as a positive response. Or if you don't like something, you can actually whack it. It makes a very sad sound. And that's supposed to be the negative response. They also say that it kind of learns its name. So the generic name is Paro, but you could call it something else, and it's supposed to start responding to that. But it's kind of this one's a closed box, which is why we added sensors. But yeah, it has some learning in it. Mm-hmm.
Are these becoming commonplace in Japanese senior centers then, apart from special studies? And
Mm-hmm.
are they becoming commonplace anywhere in the United States that are separate from that study?
Yeah, so this one is actually a commercial. It's the only one that's a commercial product. So this is FDA approved as a biofeedback device. And it's used, so people purchase it in the US. Since it's been in Japan for a longer time, they purchased it much more widely. One interesting thing about Japan is that about 70% of people who buy this are individuals in the home. So in the US, I don't think there are many cases at all of people buying them for themselves. It's mostly institutions, but in Japan, there's also this kind of personal use side. And I also know that in Denmark, one of the municipal governments, they did a big study where they tested, does this work? And then they decided to buy them for a few hundred institutions. Mm-hmm.
How much does Paro cost?
Paro is a little expensive. It's one of its problems. It's $6,000. It is very high quality, though. There is now, I think Hasbro, it's called the Joy for All, and it's either a cat or a dog. That one is $100, I believe. So we've actually tested both Joy for All and Paro in nursing homes, and people do recognize the quality of the Paro, but they also, for example, the low cost of the Joy for All matters a lot, because then they can just leave it with their patients without having to worry about it, and that makes it much easier for the nursing staff. So yeah, the cost matters a bunch. Yeah?
One more?
Yeah, so when you develop one of these things, you're doing it collaboratively,
Mm-hmm.
across institutions with some public funding. Who owns the intellectual property of all this?
I don't usually worry about that. But I think if it's across different institutions, then it would be like the different institutions would kind of legally decide together who owns which of the intellectual property. Because often, and this is my completely non-expert opinion, so always go ask the lawyers, they usually make some kind of contract between the institutions about who's responsible for what and then who keeps what.
Thank you. Yeah, just, we'll close soon. Okay, so thank you, Selma. Our club gives a speaker recognition gift to, each quarter to a certain agency. We're doing it this quarter to the Area 10 Agency on Aging, in your honor. Okay, next week's program, which will be introduced by Elaine Gwynn, we'll have Frank Kirker talking about the opioid epidemic from the Sober Joe coffee location perspective, and that will be in the solarium, as far as we know. So you'll be notified if there's any change. And next week, the greeter will be Jim Capshew, Pledge and Reflection with Glenda Murray, and Steve Engel will introduce guests, and the roundabout reporter, again, John Diltz. So I've got a thought for the week. It's a quote from Rotary founder Paul Harris. "It has been the way of Rotary to focus thought upon matters in which members are in agreement, rather than upon matters in which they are in disagreement." And I will add that most of the really important stuff we all agree on, and that's what makes this a great club. So let's stand, please, and recite the four-way test +1. In all of the things we say or do, first, second, third, will build goodwill and friendships, fourth, will be beneficial to all concerned, and fifth, will it be fun? Okay. Thank you.